Hello, everyone. All right, we are starting. Let's see, which mic is it using? Oh, it's using the wrong mic. Oh no, that's the right mic. You can tell. It's only using 3 dots to indicate that it's hearing me. So that was actually probably very annoying for you to listen to. But of course, you're not listening to this because I haven't posted it yet. Let's see. Maybe in the future. Okay. Might want to fast forward a couple minutes if you're watching this, because we are currently in preparation, getting this ready. Two viewers, how is that even possible? Somehow, could that actually be someone found it via the YouTube page? Let's see. All right. Well, bam. So we are currently ready to go. Now, I did a lot less work specifically making sure people will show up to actually talk this time, but hopefully someone will come in and we shall talk about it. Oh, Chris is here. This is good.
Hello.
Hello, Chris.
Now I'm visible.
Fantastic. All right. We have a great topic today. I'm really excited to talk about the Chad Psychoanalysis. Look at that. And Elliot is here. Other Elliot is here as well. The original cast and crew of the Hangouts. See if I can get this directorial aspect working. Cameraman, you can be the cameraman, it says. So I don't give people seizures. Oh, wow. Yes. You look really ready.
Oh, damn it.
I can't. Other Elliot, we can't hear you, by the way. I see your mouth moving, but we can't hear you.
I should get sunglasses so I can be a Chad. But then again, perhaps sunglasses are not necessary for the true Chad.
I mean, there's different brands of Chad. Isn't that what we decided in the in the comment sections? You know, it's interesting because there are actual respectable people in the group, as in like former professors of mine and things like that. And I always know whenever I see one of those comment threads, if you're wondering why I always act as the super ego, it's because I know the big other, the panopticon of reason is peering in. even if at this point they're always professorial authority in my head. They don't have to actually be my professor.
Nietzsche, the ultimate Chad, denies reason.
Let's see.
Luckily.
Other Elliot, you got to get that mic working. Oh, it's gone. Well, here's what I wanted to talk about. So masculinity, there's so many there's so many issues with talking about masculinity, and it can so easily devolve into the Jordan Peterson subsection of basically just misogyny and anger. Uh, and I see it happen so often when people try to breach the topic of positive masculinity, and then usually the converse of that is to essentially deny the nature of masculinity as anything with positive traits, because hypothetically implying something for that is a masculine trait applies it isn't a feminine trait, which isn't true. Like, I think it's best to look at masculinity as the archetype that works through, to get Jungian for a second, but it's really important because masculinity is an archetype that can work through us, and I don't think it's necessarily works through in the way that Jung describes the animus, as something uh you know because the animus is something that's in the woman, but then there's also masculinity inside of there's also masculinity inside of us, uh and that comes out, I think, in symbolic ordering. I see other Elliot just still struggling with the microphone issue. You got to get that mic working, bud. But yeah, masculinity as something that's can be fairly empty, in that I think in the Lacanian sense, which is this great necklace I got, I found the Bohemian knot, the symbolic order. I think masculinity and symbolic ordering, which means that uh, not that men necessarily are the symbolic orderers, but I think when somebody who's purely empty symbolic order comes in to frame, we see them as hyper masculine sometimes, like a policeman, I would argue, could be a hyper masculine image, male or female, the superego image. And it scares people. People see it and they go, that's terrible. But if you think of it like a paintbrush, you can paint with that sort of empty symbolic. Two
Well,
sunglasses.
I think you raised an important point in that cop is the hypermasculine, but the truth is, and that sort of reminds me of God. So, if God the Father is the cop, this hypermasculine superego image, the Jungian self is Jesus, the weak, real, physical form in which masculinity exists.
Well, so what would Jesus be in terms of the masculine? If hyper masculinity is the cop and empty symbolic order, what does it mean that the the main people that the main worship person, I suppose, I don't know how to better put that, is Jesus. And he embraces a lot of traditionally feminine qualities, right?
Yes.
The forgiveness, and this is these archetypes, whether or not you're male, female, non-binary, etc. It's these archetypes can work through us and they overtake us, and
And that goes along with the hypermasculinity of people during Christian times, because of course with hypermasculine gods, you are allowed more effeminate and natural men, whereas when God is this perfect man, even though perhaps in his effeminate nature he is closer to reality, we essentially have to deny, we become the shadow, we become the antithesis of God in whatever case. So if God is Superman, we become weak. But if God is weak, we become Superman, etc.
Oh, that's interesting.
So the masculinity is true masculinity is what other people think it's not. It is a natural act of rebelling or a natural act of being the opposite of what is said. Like you said, destroying the symbolic order is masculine.
Well, I said imposing. Well, I guess the imposing of a symbolic order is, I think, the disposing of the imaginary. When you go to mother's desire and name of the father, and if you just shorthand that masculine and feminine, when those sort of work through us, it's easy to see, because somebody who's totally empty symbolic order can be very distressing if somebody like a pure symbolic order person could be highly agitating and highly oppressive to somebody. But I would say someone who's highly feminine on the other side, who fully embodies that and is fully imaginary with no symbolic order, and even if they're a psychosis, I would say that is less oppressive to the other. So I think you shouldn't fully embody either, but the full embodiment of the feminine, I would say, is less harmful than the full embodiment of the masculine, and that's why people.
Well, less harmful to who?
If you have somebody who's, if I'm defining masculine as empty symbolic order, which is intrinsically empty, a full embodiment of that is very sort of cut and dry, right? More so than the full but that's the thing, you have to embrace both. And when you see that and you get scared of it, because no one who likes a cop, it's so I don't mind the police. I'll say hi to the police because I recognize them as they're a force, and they embody this symbolic order that can be very harmful to people. But they're also they're people. I'm not going to go off on the police, but there's a reason why people have an intrinsically negative reaction to the police, is because they are the full embodiment of the hypermasculine, or this empty symbolic delineators. They're delineators. They're not your friends. They're delineators, right? So I think that could be very scary versus someone. What's wrong with someone who runs say even a crystal store and makes you tea or something like that? Not to say that's feminine. Well, it is feminine in that it's the imaginary, right? So the imaginary, there's nothing that doesn't impose on you. What does that impose on you? It doesn't. You can be any combination of symbolic and imaginary if you want in that environment, but in the symbolic order you have to submit. So it's it's difficult.
They had
to convince
Jesus, the effeminate Jesus was the threat to the government, which is why he's killed. So I don't know if it holds. I think an effeminate man in a masculine, like I said, in a masculine society, the effeminate man is the danger. In the effeminate society, the masculine man is the danger. So Jesus, as an effeminate man, but also as a danger, I think holds true.
That's interesting. Roman dictatorship, very, very symbolic order. The purveying order is a more, empty symbolic order. So the masculine is the embracing of the feminine. But that's the thing, is even in that frame, the current frame still exists, whereas the masculine is the oppressive force. The masculine that works through us is the more oppressive force, and the feminine is, the great light. It's like suddenly we're no longer subject to the oppressive Roman Empire because we have the feminine working through Jesus, the archetype of, the savior and the martyr. The martyr even is a male with the traditional passive sort of traits, turn the other cheek, etc., which is not always the best way to go through the world. You don't always want to turn the other cheek and then be sort of taken fully advantage of, and then
perhaps it's effeminate in the way that it's introverted, in that it denies reality, in that Jesus says no to the physical world, denies all sin, which is acceptance of the physical world, and essentially ignores everything except for himself. So in a way, like Stirner is the pure effeminate masculine, or effeminate in the nature of introversion, the pure introverted masculine, in that he is able to deny everything else. Only.
Let's continue that in a second. More about Stirner in a second. Let's just check in with everyone who's here. So Christopher's been here for a bit. Hey, Christopher, can you hear me, or do you want to talk? You just hanging out? Just hanging out. That's cool. On mute. Fair enough. Nathan, not on mute. Very active. How are you, Nathan? Oh,
Doing
Nathan
good.
Also on mute. Oh no, there he is.
I'm glad you started talking about Gibson's film, Passion of the Christ, as a pole between narcissism and masochism. So, but I'm jumping right in the middle of this. So, but I was reading about that today, so it's just nice.
I was just talking about Christ in general, just Christ.
Uh-huh.
You know, the book. The movie is based off of the book, as they say.
No way.
The original's better.
All right, wait. I want to check back in with. Wait, Christopher, are you with us talking, or are you hanging out?
Who's that?
Oh, your mic doesn't work. Mic doesn't work. Another Google chatter. That's all right. If you get it to work, it'll work. And we'll flip back to you, etc. All right. Okay. So as you were saying, Stirner is Stirner I find very the masculine, right? Stirner, you would think the guy who's pure ego and the guy who says don't pay attention to the symbolic order, make your own symbolic order, seems like the embodiment of hypermasculine, much to his own detriment. It's always sad to me. You read the book and be like, I'll talk about that when I'm an old man, and of course he hedonistically destroys himself drinking. And I think that can be a danger of egoism, is that there's no symbolic order from the outside put onto you. So he sort of looks at as the world is intrinsically the imaginary or the feminine, and he embodies the masculine, and his word is always good, which is a dangerous place to be in. Even though I am a self-proclaimed egoist, it is always dangerous to think everything I say is right. It's another thing to say, my brain is all I have, ergo, I'm going to go with it, even if I'm wrong, but then to say everything I say is right, can lead to a lot of self-destruction.
Well, I think necessarily Stirner is masculine because he denies, well, perhaps as you say, all talk of masculinity delves into sexism, but perhaps that is the way that it must be, in a way, because of the way that things have gone post-Christianity. It's simply the way it is. Our metaphysics are sexist. There's nothing to do about it. So, no, with the universe as a woman, essentially empty, but also able to, it's fertile, and the creative seed is masculine, of course. Logos, the masculine principle. So Stirner as the creative nothing, as only creation in a realm of spook. There's nothing that is pure masculine. In fact, he's so masculine that he denies the existence of woman, just as Lacan.
How does Stirner deny the existence of woman?
Because the universe as a woman, life as a woman, it's essentially all spook. Any look at reality is going to be tainted with spooks. Thus, there is no way to look at a woman. There is only the self. There is only what can be created from yourself.
Yeah.
Would you agree? And that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
So it's a denial of woman, a denial of nature. Like you said, upholding the symbolic order. The cop worships the woman, just like the chivalrous knight worships Mary. They're searching for the Holy Grail. Stirner is so masculine, he says, the Holy Grail isn't real. There is no Holy Grail. Yeah. I am my own immortality.
The imposition of the masculine is so, I think there's always in the current sort of postmodern climate, we're more attuned to sort of gender issues and stuff like that. And yet there's the sort of ancient, very traditionalist, can be very oppressive masculine archetype that comes through. So every time I hear something like, oh, the masculine is the impregnator of the universe, or as Lacan sort of puts it in a way, that there's no woman, there's the unconscious is ungendered, and there's only the logos is phallic in a way. Immediately all my alarm bells go off. I'm like, oh, that's not so. Oh, that's not so. And even someone like me who's trying to get over that postmodern denial the older archetypes as existent. It's hard to realize, because I think the individual can get over manifesting these traditionalist viewpoints of male and female, but there's no eliminating it as an other or as a shadow, I don't think. Even if you,
it's very dangerous to say that, to deny the archetype, to deny archetypes in general, to say, oh, gender isn't real, gender is simply a spectrum, is to deny the deep and rich and living history. The unconscious existence of the gendered archetypes will never be destroyed. It's impossible. You cannot destroy gender because it will remain unconscious. And to deny gendered archetypes, to deny the history and the beauty and the depth in each gender, that's the thing, is that we believe in masculine as maybe like 4 traits and feminine as 4 traits. And if you don't embody them perfectly, you're not a real man. That's why everybody's worried, I'm not a real man, or I'm not a real woman, I don't fit in. Nobody is fit in. Nobody has ever fit in throughout history. It's like, I don't embody an archetype perfectly. Oh, boo-hoo. We are humans.
Well, isn't the idea of an archetype something that is unembodiable, something that only can work through you at certain times and shifts?
And people think that gender is not that. People don't understand that gender is essentially, again, it's like you said, unembodiable, but that it is something that we will embody throughout our lives.
Do you have your Crowley deck in front of you by any chance? You always seem to have the Crowley deck.
I have Crowley, but today I'm playing with Ryder. But I'll bring it out.
You know, it's interesting if you look at the Crowley deck and you look at the masculine versus the feminine counterparts. Like,
I think the most masculine card in the deck is the Hermit.
Well, that's we have discussed that.
Well, it's very interesting because that's the opposite of the Rider. In Rider, it's Page, Knight, King, Queen.
What do you think of these guys right here, the Prince and the Princess of Discs? So hypothetically, these are sort of shadows of the man and the woman, the traditionalist sort of viewpoints. These are sort of counterpoints, and they don't really have the full emperor type going through as the king might.
Well, it's interesting.
So they both have the world under their hands, but one is sort of
in his description different. The princess is the ultimate form. The princess is the final form because she is the product of the knight and the queen, according to him. So interesting that we end with a woman. But I think that in essence, by saying the universe is a woman, is to say that it will end as a woman as well. That masculinity is ephemeral.
Well, look at this. She has a shield. Under her arm is a shield and some sort of piece, like the yin yang. Gotta love the Crowley deck. You know. And then the man has the world under his arm.
The globe.
The woman has the shield and peace of mind. And the masculine he's riding a bull. The shadow of the masculine is riding a bull and is holding the world and is sort of going, it looks like he's going to war. Who would you rather encounter? The shadow of the feminine or the shadow of the masculine, just in the street, just randomly in ancient times? Because it seems like you'd rather encounter the feminine. I think that's the appeal of the feminine, is this, you don't know what his agenda is, no matter what her agenda is. It doesn't look like she's out to get anybody, right?
I don't know. I think that's the point. I think it's that we despise the bitter woman more than we despise the violent man.
Oh, I think that can vary. The bitter, because you get the bitter who despises who. I would say maybe the masculine other, because woman is other. It might be easier for us to quote unquote despise, but I think if for the woman, I think it might be much easier to despise the other as a male, especially if this is the other. if you are embodying this archetype, or is this is sort of imposed on you, no matter, you know, who you are as a person, this is sort of, this unconscious imagery is sort of suggested to you.
Do you have?
You see that the violent, it's so easy to pick through that. It's like, why, fuck that.
Let's change.
Right?
Do you have the Prince of Swords and Princess of Swords?
Oh, I'm gonna dig through. I'm gonna dig through. Let's see. By the way, I asked the tarot. I'm playing a chess tournament this week, and I asked the tarot how I'm gonna do, and I got ruined.
No. Well, it could be your unconscious.
Classic tarot. It was randomly picked, shuffled, and let's see.
The unconscious fear of failure.
Oh, it's very conscious, I would say. My fear of failure in chess tournaments. No, let's see. Princess of Swords. There's the Princess of Swords.
And you have the Prince of Swords.
Oh, I do.
Okay, so
somewhere.
The Prince. All right. Also, so Princess of Swords. To me, the card reminds me distinctly of Tinkerbell. She has a sort of see-through dress, wings, and a sword, and she's sort of flying on pond smoke. And while the swords generally are violent, when we look at the Prince of Swords, he is sort of this faceless, dark monster with people under him as well. His chariot is drawn by people. So that could show you the bitter woman as somebody who is the shadow of the woman is somebody who is who acts on their own volition, who acts on their own will, whereas the shadow of the man, the shadow of the prince, is somebody who manipulates others and is violent to others. It is their negativity to others, or their negativity utilizing others, whereas the woman's negativity is simply her own act. Sorry, I'm having a hard time.
So in that way,
like
I said previously, you know, the Stirner egoist ideal seems more feminine than the male. If the ego, you're saying it's only the self, the Princess of Swords is an individual.
Of her. If we have that shadow archetype of Stirner woman.
You mean Ayn Rand?
Exactly. That's why liberals love to hate her, because people talk about feminism liberating women, but Ayn Rand,
the ultimately liberated individualist,
is despised.
Yeah,
and that's the truth. Fuck.
Well, women are liberated, but they're liberated to do certain things. Oh, somebody, Chris, your feedback. You need earphones.
Me?
Yeah, you. I see when I talk, your little bar goes up.
Yeah, I'll get some.
All right. Let's see. Hello, other Elliot. Is your microphone working yet?
I don't know. Is it?
Oh, it works. There he is.
Okay.
There he is. Speaking of egoism, it's the other Elliot. Fellow egoist. Fellow Elliot.
Hello, fellow Elliot.
Funny that the other egoist would be somebody that shares one of your identifiable
traits.
Yeah.
Which is
somebody obsessed with the self is somebody who is.
Well, you know, if your last name is Brown or Johnson, you're about 4 times more likely to marry someone with Brown last name than with the other common last name. So you're more likely to, if you identify as somebody on a superficial level like that, for some reason, you're more likely to just give them a shot.
Is my feedback still bad, or could I keep it?
No, it's gone. No feedback.
Okay. All right.
Oh, he's pretty blood.
So, the Chad psychoanalysis.
What is it, and how can we improve it?
What is it, and how can we improve it?
Yeah.
What is the Chad psychoanalysis? I think the initial connotations are obviously that it's somehow sexist, that it's somehow hyper masculine and imposing. And I think that argument isn't necessarily invalid, right? You know, Freud is sort of, most of his patients were women, and women were much more likely to be diagnosed as hysterics and stuff like that. So there's the shadow of masculinity in psychoanalysis as well. So I think when you say something like the Chad psychoanalysis and masculinity in psychoanalysis, you can't help but to remind the listener of its origins as something that was intrinsically pointed at women for the most part. There were men in analysis, but the majority were women. Freud patients.
I think that raises a good point, but I think to continue it is that these were very wealthy women and wealthy men. So,
Or their patriarchs were wealthy.
is the wealthy woman the embodiment of psychoanalysis?
Well, a lot of institutions I'm a huge fan of were, largely came about and even today are still sustained by bourgeois middle class woman's taste, like the contemporary novel, which is one of my favorite things. Women were among its most early and avid readership. And so that's the same for psychoanalysis in terms of people who, they were diagnosed with, but even today, women are more likely to seek out therapeutic help than men. So
is
that's kind of a tangent.
The Chad psychoanalysis, is it Chad because it's men essentially making women more powerful? It's like it's like Prometheus giving fire to people, like this sort of enlightened psychoanalyst. Or is it Chad? Or is Chad psychoanalysis only for Chads?
I think that this group is a microcosm. It's a female dominated profession, and I think that can create a sort of sexist backlash. But it also means that if men aren't, why aren't men in the profession is the obvious question, and easy answers, not accurate answers. Men are assholes, maybe not sensitive.
That implies that therapists aren't assholes.
That implies that therapists are sensitive,
right?
More sensitive. But then there's what's empathy, and I always think empathy is more intellectually in tune, and I think feeling is part of it. And I think, but if your feeling is invested in the other, and you're just taking on the feelings of the other, you might be empathetic by a dictionary definition of empathy, which I looked up. And I was like, oh, I guess that technically is empathy. But in terms of a meaningful empathy is an understanding of the other, a logical, symbolic understanding, as well as just you're very sad, ergo I as the therapist should be very sad, or reflect or empathize somehow, and via me getting sad or me imparting and I.
Right.
Yeah. Are you ready for this? I realized something from what you said.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready for this.
So female-dominated therapy. CBT is the dominant style because, in general, we expect doctors and women to want to help people, and CBT is like solely like, let's get rid of negative thinking. Let's think positive. Let's change things for the better. Whereas psychoanalysis, with Lacan especially, in general, it's arguably like, haha, let's make you really unhappy. Let's make you feel pain so that you can understand how to be happy, so that you can understand how to be better and greater. Psychoanalysis involves inflicting pain and continuously going over pain. It's not about helping people. It's not about ignoring pain. It's sort of in touch with horror and the analyst as an agent of pain.
Sure, but I would argue that's what's, obviously we're on the pro psychoanalysis side, but that's what's immediately subversive about that approach, because typically maybe when, some bourgeois father was like, my daughter's so hysterical, I don't like that, she needs to be some other way, and he hires this person for her. Imagine if, this was the the 20th century, late 20th century CBT person, they would be like, let's manage your negative feelings so that they're less and you stop bothering people with them. Because to me, that's what, like, even if the person does feel better, to me, that seems as if that approach is in service to just kind of emotional repair of the person, insofar as then they make other people feel good. And it's this kind of...
That's the essence of helping people and wanting to help people.
Yeah, but...
effective care.
Right, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't... does that come from... I mean, that could just come, obviously, from an ignorance of what alternatives there are, but it doesn't seem to come from a deep desire to help people necessarily. That approach, to me, it seems like a desire to whatever.
Well, I'm not saying it's inherent. I'm just saying that because psychology is a female-dominated field, and CBT is the dominant therapy, we are shown that. I'm not like saying that.
Oh, right. I see what you're saying. This is how it can be framed.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, that's a good. I agree.
Well, the behavioral therapies. That's the other thing is we can. This is a behavioral therapy is created. I don't know any women in maybe now, but in positions of power creating cognitive behavioral therapy. There's Marsha Linehan creating dialectical behavioral therapy, which adds this sort of mindfulness element to it, and adds the wise mind element to it, and incorporates more feeling into it. And then originally behavioral therapy, I love Ellis as a person just so much. He's just so funny to me. He's just like a really funny guy, and he always has that shit-eating grin. Yeah. Because he'll basically, he says stuff that it's just so trolly, and it can help to some degree. Like he said, well, why do you deserve to be treated fairly? Why do you have to be treated fairly? Why do you, which, partially is, it has some truth to it, as in, well, we can walk through the world and nobody is going to look out for our best interests. Ergo, we shouldn't expect it. Okay. But then he goes on to be like, okay, the Freudian unconscious is sort of nonsense. I love how he says the unconscious is nonsense, but then being the absolutely, totally Chad psychotherapist he is, he'll quote him and then use him.
Nice.
I just think Ellis, he really did take over psychology. He really did.
In the most literal way, the unconscious is nonsensical, though. It doesn't make sense immediately.
Yeah.
Well, are we talking about the theories of how the unconscious is structured? Because
no, just the unconscious itself.
Okay.
I mean, to say the unconscious is nonsense, rather than the concept of the unconscious, but the unconscious itself, arguably, if not.
Well, the movement in ego psychology is all about how to get away from the mysterious and how to market it to everyday people, because the origin of psychoanalysis is very hard to parse out. For you can be as intelligent as you want, but it takes studying to get Freud. And I think that's also the appeal of Freud, which is the most damning thing that anybody has ever said to me about why people are drawn to psychoanalysis was said by I think he was a writer / English professor. He said, what I really liked about Lacan is whether or not it's correct, it's like a puzzle you have to figure out, and that's the appeal to me. And I said, well, That's a very interesting statement, because it really made me do a big think. Because
Yeah.
the appeal of Lacan is, it is a figure out, but then it is figuring out actuality, things that exist, right? So the reason it's the thing that you have to have a plateau. I like to throw in a Deleuze once in a while, much like Ellis
Right.
throwing in Freud. You have to have a plateau. What are you solving? There has to be a solution. Oh, you're solving something, and then you've solved this, and then you've created a symbolic order that isn't immediately apparent, versus like a behavioral therapy, or just creating a symbolic order that you can explain it to anybody. You'd be like, oh, this is a belief, and it's not based on rational thinking, and it's based on worst case scenario, and you don't know that's going to happen, and if it does happen, well, maybe it's not that bad, and you should, that's very simplistic. And I think it can work as like immediate. They're like, oh, it immediately works. Well, to some degree, but your brain sort of has a way of resetting those cognitive changes. And if you only get one. You only get one day at a time. You borrow an AA phrase for a different purpose, because you live, and then you sleep, and then you unconsciously process, and then you wake up. And what happens during that time is your brain is figuring out stuff, and the unconscious content is coming up, and there's nothing you can do about it. So there's a level of resetting.
But through the process of sleeping, aren't certain neural connections strengthened, others not? Like, that's the whole point, that it's part of the learning process that some connections slough off. So it sounds like what you're saying is that, like, certain whatever, a negative thought, a complex that people return to, and that they'd like to just edit out, even returns to you in your dreams, and so therefore those connections get strengthened no matter what you do, kind of. Or
I'm kind of saying the opposite. I'm saying when you have a nice thought, that will get reset. When you say, I'm not going to worry about that ever again, because it's just not healthy. Like an obsessive compulsive, you tell an obsessive compulsive person, hey, listen, and CBT works well for obsessive compulsive disorder. It's one of the things it's most effective for. There's a lot of stuff, and it makes a lot of sense, because it's not necessary. It is unconscious content, but a lot of it is, action.
Right.
So you can tell an obsessive compulsive person, and they, oh, don't do this, and they go, okay, I'm not going to do this, and they can cognitively do something, and then they go to sleep, and then the unconscious content will come back up, and then it'll sort of reset. So that's why, they constantly, the CBT process is a constant monitoring of the self, and then cognitively being like, okay, don't do that. Because, that's part of what you actually need to do with obsessive compulsion, is a lot of it is action. It's not necessarily.
I'm curious about this subjectivity. I'm not familiar with psychoanalysis. I'm more coming from like subjectivity of activity versus subjectivity of receptivity, right? So like with CBT, you have to make these cognitive actions to produce these ego structures to change your actual compulsions, right? And I'm curious about with Chad, like Chad's relationship to the unconscious. Every person, male or female, has capacities of reception, open to the unknown, in order to you have to be slightly destable in order to evolve, right? And so I'm curious about whether the Chad's any space for this kind of receptivity, right? That is associated with the feminine.
Oh, sorry, you're a little delayed, so I think we keep stepping over each other. But as you have that Peterson group of yours. So he loves the behaviorists. He loves the early behaviorists. He's very into them, and so a lot of his Jungian stuff is tempered with behaviorism, and I think there is something to be said about it, but you can't. he doesn't like that people are like, oh, clean your room is now a meme. But there is a problem behind you know, the clean your room meme, and it does seem very simple, right? You know, someone he's very what is it, conscientious, tests very high in conscientiousness in terms of his stuff is
Very orderly already.
he organizes and he puts stuff together, but
Right.
so he can say that, but I don't think I think that makes it more difficult for him to understand that there's a deeper meaning behind the unclean room. It's not, you can't, as Jack White says, you can't take the effect and make it the cause, right?
Yeah.
I didn't
So
rob a bank because you made up the law, etc.
Yeah. So I'm curious about if the Chad is open to something or receptive to some that be, and can the Chad be compatible with this more feminine sort of capacities that we associate with the feminine, but doesn't necessarily, you know.
Yeah, I think.
Should we sort
I
ourselves?
think the actual, what is it? There's I think the archetype of Chad is a little different than the archetype of the hypermasculine. Chad is the hypermasculine, but he's also like sort of, he's very unreal. Like there's I would say people may identify briefly with the archetype, but there is a sort of, in the meme, there's like he's very sort of posing. He's like posing for everybody.
It's funny. I was thinking about the meme, and I thought the most important part that goes along with that is his unblinking eye. To say he's receptive, he's literally constantly receiving information because his eye doesn't blink. He also he moves very slowly. They said he has like a tight beetle-like stride, so he's just always watching and barely moving.
The all-seeing eye of Chad.
Yeah. Question is, Chad is the father. The virgin beta is Jesus Christ, the son.
Oh, that's a hot take I like.
That's good.
It makes sense. It makes sense that the father, God the Father, is the punitive. Then the mother isn't necessarily Mary, but is Jesus, right?
Both.
There's an edgy take. The Bible is an intrinsically homosexual, incestual story, with the father is Jesus and the father is God and the mother is Jesus. Sorry, my education just came through me and I
just kicked in.
I had to say it that way.
It's all good.
And then the Holy Spirit sort of, who knows what the Holy Spirit would be in that scenario.
Well, the Holy Spirit's more feminine. It's a bird. It's a dove, I believe. All right, I have something.
Wait. Before we change topics, if that was going to happen, I just got to say something about the clean your room meme, because it was something that made an impression on me. As someone who's lower in conscientiousness, I definitely can't always keep a very tidy environment, even if I'm trying. It tends very quickly towards a certain kind of disorder. But I don't think that makes the exercise any less useful, especially if you're trying to trying to identify some underlying apathy or perverse need for destruction of your own environment or something. Because if anything, when you put everything in its place, the first thing that goes out of place, it really stands out, and you can go wow, why did I, it's like the first time you just throw something on the floor, it's like, whoa, I just did that. Instead of, if you already have your entire wardrobe on the floor, you don't really notice that you're adding to that. So I don't know. I think maybe I'm giving Jordan too much credit, but I think it's a good exercise for anyone, anywhere on that, the conscientiousness spectrum, because it gives you perspective on yourself, even if it's not, if you're very conscientious, but your room is dirty, that's a sign that you're really screwed up, because that's so against your type. But I think it can be useful either way, mostly because it's something that's right at hand that you're oh yeah, I could do that. So you can feel as tired and sad or depressed or whatever as possible, but you can do that. So it's like, regardless of how it's an exercise for anybody. And I was thinking about how Chad would approach this problem, because if Chad was told to clean his room, you know, he would obviously have to do it, but he would have to do it in some other way, like by burning it down, you know.
How does Chad Chad cleans his room by burning it down?
By burning it down.
That's Brother Elliot.
Right.
All right, I will go from
Wait.
there.
But that would be the opposite. Would not burning the room down? How is that not the ultimate disorder?
That's how we clean germs. He's cleaning it.
Well, it's because if you say it's a concrete box, everything the room itself is not flammable, but everything in it is. That's where Chad lives, and so by burning his whole room, it becomes, you know, he's minimalized and simplified his life. He doesn't have to worry about where all those books go.
Chad,
and, you know,
the alchemist, burning away all the negativity.
Yeah, I mean, he creates order through maximal disorder, you know. And so that's just taking it all the way. That's how I see. I'm still mastering the Chad formula though, so I don't want to say that's definitive, but it's something along those lines, I feel like.
Well, the Chad is sterile if the Chad is the burnt room.
Oh, right. but that's how you get to the gold at the end. You have to go through putrefaction.
All right, I'm going to come back to the Chad room cleaning at a future time. I'll have a more.
All right, I will. So
I will take a quick pee. So, Chris.
All right.
I generally leave it with you because you always have something to say.
Okay, so I'm sure everybody's like aware of Harry Potter. Yeah.
Yes.
You've heard of the killing curse, Avada Kedavra.
No, I don't know what that is.
That's how they kill.
Okay.
Voldemort kills people.
Okay.
But it is initially a curse used to clean.
Whoa.
Kills germs. It initially was used to sanitize.
Nice.
But it was perverted into a destructive force for life. And it comes, of course, from the real life abracadabra, or in Arabic, avra kadavra, which means let it be destroyed. And they would write it onto amulets and put it on when there were times of plague, so that it could destroy the sickness, destroy the demons that brought sickness. So Chad as the so the question of Chad burning down the room to clean it, he is very much like Voldemort, perverting what was once clean into what is now essentially deadly. It's accelerationism. He accelerates everything to its, from a cleaning curse to a killing curse, from cleaning the room to burning the room down. He still is acting on the same principle. It's simply advanced to its totality.
It's been made better by Chad.
So basically, Voldemort is an accelerationist Chad.
Yeah, I mean that's clear. That's clear.
Well, doesn't that paint the masculine as terrible once again?
But
if the ultimate,
that's the point. He denies morality. He denies the set morality. He must.
Well, also, he's not burning down the planet. He's burning down his room. He's anti-materialist. He's like, I don't need all these things. You know, we don't. Maybe that's what gets burnt away. It's just all the crap.
Exactly.
That,
he's getting rid of bureaucracy. He doesn't.
Think about Fight Club. You know, you definitely have the virgin Edward Norton and the Chad Brad Pitt. Like that's obvious. Like,
but that's dangerous. Is the shadow Chad? Are we the eternal beta because we are not the shadow?
Well, I mean that goes back to who are the Chad memes directed at, and I feel like it's a sense of it's not directed at people who like go to the gym 5 times a week to achieve the Chad physique, but who also would not, you know, it's like if you're given the choice between Chad and the trying to remember one of the things like
beta.
No, it's like the virgin something. There's always something, you know. He has to be a virgin something, but I can't, you know. It's like it's always
the Chad Psychoanalysis, and then the Virgin blank.
Right. But what it was like the virgin
Psychology.
behaviorist, or I don't know. But crap, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, the point being, to me it seems like those memes are an attempt to both mock, but like sort of reclaim, like somewhat that like shadow of the like dude who's a Chad and sucks because he's just like a big broy douche. But then the Chad figure is always doing the thing that the person who makes the meme likes.
I am Chad, destroyer of worlds.
Yeah, and so it's like it's an ironic like framing to embrace that, which is, you know, in the movie Fight Club, it's all about like, oh yeah, like he was too. It was good to, I don't know, not be a lame cubicle guy, but he took it too far or something. You know, it's like about balance or something. But
so is becoming Chad, in a way, becoming death? And does that mean becoming masculine is an
acceleration in the ultimate acceleration and birth, death and rebirth are the ultimate masculine, or excuse me, not birth, but rebirth is masculine. Birth is feminine, but rebirth is masculine.
I don't know about that.
But death, because rebirth requires death, and death is masculine.
That's straight from Peterson, I think.
The phoenix is masculine. Fire, death, and rebirth. That's like the ultimate masculine combination.
Okay. All right. I never sexed the phoenix, but I'm gonna take your word. Take your word on it.
That was just me thinking aloud. I'm not.
Okay. Well, yeah. I think it's overlaid over the phoenix when we're doing these sort of like thought experiments. I don't think the singularization of phoenix is always a masculine, as if.
I have a counter example.
Go for it.
Ready for this.
But you ever read the novel The Awakening?
I've not.
No.
At the end of that story, the heroine kind of attempts to rebirth herself or recreate herself, but she doesn't. So, like, there's a female that attempts to become reborn, but she fails in doing so, and that's what the novel's about. So, like, I feel there's cases of females trying to become reborn, but failing. I'm sure that's the thing.
That kind of upholds that idea, that dichotomy.
Women fail at it, men succeed at rebirth.
Yeah.
Well, see, this is the issue with masculinity, right? This is the issue of the male as the hero versus the lack of.
But there are plenty of things that men fail at that women succeed at. It's not sexist to say that men or women can succeed at something while the other fails.
No, but it's if you define masculinity as what women must fail at, then that's when it, right? I mean,
isn't childbirth something that a biological male cannot do?
Yeah, but no one frames it that way, right?
I don't know. I think a lot of women frame themselves as I am creator, something that man cannot.
Yeah, but it's not like that's just, you know, like Chad would say, you know, if I had a womb, I totally could give birth, but that's not my fault. You know, it's not like a failure of like willpower or effort or something. So it's
a very
like
biological thing.
Fuck.
All right. So what I'm hearing, I'm gonna channel my inner therapist. I try not to do that. What I'm hearing.
Okay.
I always try to steer away from the tropes. The Chad, as you said, is sort of a superego. Oh, if I had a womb, I could give birth. Right? Isn't that the ultimate sort of imposing symbolic, the empty symbolic order, aka the superego, aka the sort of aggression or death drive? I think the masculine has a lot of death drive, right, intrinsically in it. And you're hearing all this stuff, and it's like, okay, we got to get rid of this, or we got to get rid of that. We have to burn this. We have to burn that. And then which makes it so hard for people to pitch it, because it'd be like, oh, so you just burn stuff, or you're destroy. It's so much easier to pitch Eros than it is Thanatos, because Eros is love. It's easy to pitch love, right? You need to love each other because love is positive. And that's the problem with the sort of transcendental meditation that I have, or any sort of Buddhist stuff, which is this sort of singular, it's not a duality. A lot of people focus on, the positivity, or briefly touching on the negative as if it's only a way to get to the positive.
I disagree completely. It's neither. It's an acceptance of both. It's an acceptance of the Tao. It's an acceptance of everything. Very much like Nietzsche, it's accepting horror and beauty. It's accepting it all. It's not about, oh, negativity is just a way to get to positivity. That's only modern. That's only modern people. Disregard all these modern folk, like, oh, we can be happy, we can be at peace. Like, you don't want to be happy.
But that's essentially what we're working with, though. Like, like, in a way, if that's the Buddhism that exists for us as modern and Western subjects, like, then we'd have to define an authentic or other kind of Buddhism in contrast to that, I feel, which you're doing right now. But it's
I disregard everything modern. I only go by what I view as the golden age. I only go with my formula. See, I reject your reality and subject it to my own.
Or substitute my own.
Substitute my own. Thank you.
They talk about, I think Jung claims a lot of stuff that it gets sort of stuck in Jung, but is sort of, if it's really obvious and it just intrinsically makes sense, then you might be dealing with an archetype. Mm-hmm. So I reject your reality and I substitute my own. Is that masculine or feminine, though?
Totally masculine, because the reality is feminine.
Well, the problem with that is then if the masculine is symbolic, then the feminine would be imaginary, right? So the imaginary is a creation, and I would say the masculine is a delineation of raw data. So I would say as you were talking before, the woman as creator, and this. Oh
no, the woman as creator.
Once again, as we're talking, like, this is a lot of it will seem like, cisgender normative stuff. But the sort of old archetypes of
the woman is the whole,
masculine and feminine.
The woman is everything. It's the masculine that is the creator. Ironically, I know it's complicated, but
it doesn't quite jive with me, because if
that's the modern way.
The idea of everything is such a
okay. Okay, I have to.
Okay.
Feminism itself in the 19th and 20th century, there are two different feminisms going on, and this probably fits within the Jungian or
only two. Sorry,
is kind of like your Lucy Irigaray and somewhat Julia Kristeva, where it's like there is a feminine perspective distinct and our perceptions receptive to how we are different to form a sort of more not synergistic, sorry, but like more complementarity sort of, right? This sort of, or like this fluidity where it's where they embrace being feminine, right? But there's the other feminism, which is tied to Mary Wollstonecraft and classical liberalism, and now xenofeminism, which is this idea of the woman as being sort of enraged at the positions her body is put, like pigeonholing of this body, and they want to gain mastery. So it's more of the Chad pole almost.
The Chad
so, like,
feminist?
I feel like it's two different feminine trajectories.
The Chad feminist?
Yes.
Woman, not to conflate with the various varieties of feminist men.
Chad, because it denies what is set. You have to deny what is set to be Chad. It has to be like a revolutionary act, just like burning down the room. The feminist that is accepting of her own femininity would say, like, all right, I'll clean my room. That sounds like a reasonable thing to do. Whereas the Chad feminist is like, fuck, I don't even need a room. Like, let's get rid of it. This is pointless. This is stupid. Just like, that's why like the Meninist counterpart to feminism is simply non-existent, because anybody that is actually interested in any masculine benefit knows not to define themselves by gender, because gender is something set.
Yeah, the Meninist that's a total false equivalency to the feminism movement. Even if they have like one part, even if they're like searching, they find an issue where it's tilted in women's favor. It's of course pervaded by general sort of.
But we can't infantilize women as being helpless, because women are the agents of reality. We are given birth to, and thus reality is maintained by women.
You know, that's an interesting idea, that reality is maintained by women, and I think we can move to a topic I wanted to address eventually. Oh man, this light is coming through in a very strange angle. But the topic I wanted to address, good old microphone can travel with me, is what the patriarchy versus this patriarchal society, or the idea of a patriarchal society versus the feminine society, and what would a feminine society look like? And
great question. I've been reading a lot of this book called, like, give me a second, I'll even get it. It's like this massive book.
Good job.
The Woman's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets. And it's like this bizarre but awesome look at, like, I don't know if it's real or not, because I'm no good historian. But
is this like what the Nazi Jewish book that the Jews supposedly wrote? No.
This is written by a woman. It's written by a woman, and interestingly enough, this is her one academic work. All of her other books are about sewing and knitting, but this is like this massive.
That's legit.
This is a triumph of feminist historical revisionism. It's awesome. It is an amazing book because it depicts reality very much in the classic occult aeons of, like, we are currently in a patriarchal aeon of the dead god, preceded by a maternal aeon. And she has like this massive myth. I don't know, because a lot of people kind of say that it's not true. A lot of people say there were never like massive matriarchal governments for any extended period of time. But of course, this book is acting based on the thought that is true. But in my opinion, it may be and you'll see a lot of New Age women believe in that. They believe in this matriarchal society that once existed, because it is a projection of the Golden Age. It is literally a projection of returning to the womb of absolute peace. How can we talk about a matriarchal society without it being mommy is taking care of me? There is no way to say a matriarchy without it being the lovely mother, the womb, the protective agent. Like, there's
the motherland, the Russian communist state of the motherland versus the German Nazi fatherland, right? They each have different connotations. The hyper delineating on every, the more you can barter the subject, the better. The more you can sort of otherize other people through discourse, the better, versus that we're going to take care of everybody except the people that threaten, and then we're going to kill those guys, of course.
There's currently, like, the height of this, because have you guys read Sloterdijk, or
what is it?
No.
I'm probably jumping. Okay, so Sloterdijk tries.
Your mic is like sort of your internet connection.
Yeah, you're going in and out.
I can we can only hear like every other word of you.
Forget it then.
No, come closer. Come closer.
Well,
Okay, so
That doesn't make it.
I made it. I made it worse. I made it worse.
That actually made it 0 words getting through.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe back away.
How is this
Wow.
working now?
It's okay. It's okay.
Andre Dvorkin.
At all?
I think you need a better internet connection.
Roger.
Type it for us. Type it for us.
Yeah, you can type it and then Chris will read it. All right. What are you saying?
Who?
Okay, well, I don't know how much I'll get through. I'll type it in the meantime, but Peter Sloterdijk is all about returning to the womb, and Mes and
Yeah,
I
we
was
can't
joshing
hear you
Elliot about this.
because it keeps
Yeah,
stopping
I'll just
up.
type it.
Yeah,
I'll
just
type it. I'll type. Yeah.
I think what does it mean? What does it mean that whether or not wherever you fall on the political spectrum, that we have the idea of the patriarchy is so pervasive, and what does that mean? Well, isn't society intrinsically, whether you call it the motherland or not, delineating? As society delineates what you can and can't do. That's why we don't, if to go into some real dark theory like the neo-reactionary theory, they'll say, well, now this is how people automatically react. People aren't very rational a lot of times. Like, how do you like politics? So if you go, oh, you like politics? No, I don't like politics. Blah, 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 blah. I don't like politics. Well, do you like democracy? Okay. Yeah, I like democracy. Well, democracy is politics, right? So it's the framing of, do you like policemen? Oh, I don't like policemen. Well, do you think policemen should be treated unfairly, or I don't know, like hit? And then some people will be like, yeah, but other people will be like, no, that doesn't really sound right. So there's a recognition of the necessity for these sort of delineating empty, oftentimes oppressive and violent roles, right?
What Nathan talked about sounds like very interesting. I need to read him because it sounds so interesting. A negative gynecology to bring back hypnosis and eugenics and vague human breeding and eugenics of some sort. Basically, a fantasy of a technopolitics, a global daycare spheres. So like Brave New World. Like we hypnopatically educate all children. So it's just like constantly everything is positive. It's like a very positive upbringing by way of essentially like absolute control over children.
I think it's so funny how the right has fully, with the new resurgence of the alt-right, has embraced these like dark archetypes. They're just fully channeling them. They're, you ask them 10 years ago, do you support fascism, and you support monarchy, and do you support blah blah blah, treating people like, of course not, that's fucked up. And then of course, then people will say, oh, the right wingers, they're fascists, or then you get people like Trump, and they do have, there's sort of like exclusionary tendencies. I would say that's intrinsic to the right wing, is you have to create the individual and then not impose on the individual at the heart of it. And then ironically, it goes in various ways that leads to an imposing on the individual that is the other, because your individualities can't not conflict.
We must thank accelerationism and meme magic for bringing us this hyper acceleration of politics. We've gone right past all of the pleasant frivolity. We're directly into the archetypal heart of darkness. Well, all right, maybe not all the way, but we're getting closer.
You'll never get another Trump. No way. I
guarantee you we will.
No one like Trump.
Kanye West, 2020.
No, it's not happening. Trump is he's an anomaly. You have to believe in the individual. If you want to, let's take a note from the right wingers and believe in the individual. There's something unique to him, in as the terms of the pure vulgarity and the chant and the ability to tap into these.
Perhaps, but we will never return to traditional politics.
Well, what would traditional politics be?
Boring, not fun to watch on TV.
Very true.
Fuck that.
We're going to take on entertainment politics. I mean, we already have, but like extreme entertainment politics.
I mean, look at this Freud group. What is this but entertainment?
Oh, for sure, for
advocacy?
sure.
Hence Peterson 2020 types, Nathan.
Okay, so I had a realization a while back. Now that we're talking about memes again, which is my area of expertise.
Yeah.
About Chad, because you were saying Chad is this hyper-masculine thanatotic image, but I realized that is not Chad, because Chad is definitely, at least also, erotic. He has eros, and in fact, traditionally, eros was portrayed as a male, sometimes androgynous, but sometimes not. And you can see with, like Chad's like his kind of sly look, and obviously his posing is not purely assertive. It's like kind of showy, and his full pursed lips, so he definitely has, he's not simply hypermasculine in the traditional way. So,
but he doesn't need to care for his hair. He doesn't need to even change his clothes. It's a natural. It comes to him naturally. Also, I can't send images for some reason, but
Sad.
I'll just talk about the meme. Visualize it.
Okay.
So it's a look at Chad and virgin sex, and the virgin is like small. The girl is on her phone. He doesn't get her to orgasm, but the Chad is strangling the girl. There is BDSM involved because the Chad is thanatonic. Like you buy it, it's impossible to escape it because for a man. All right, we'll go. Okay.
Oh no!
Chad is a rogue.
Oh no! Other Elliot disappeared.
No. I was about to lay down important memes.
No, go for it.
All right. So Chad is necessarily a rogue to be attracted to women. It's a very biological thing. I think we all know this. But for Chad to be an erotic symbol, he has to be harmful to women. He has to be that bad boy rogue. It's simply biological. It can't be argued.
Oh no.
I need him to come back. I'm not ready.
The good, the bad, the ugly. That's what this ultimately got titled is the Chad Psychoanalysis, masculinity as psychic content, the good, the bad, and the ugly of masculinity.
Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
What's wrong? No, but that's the thing. There is the bad and the ugly, right?
The good, the virgin, the Chad.
Is the virgin the good, or is, I would say, I had this thought, what if the virgin is the hypermasculine, because the virgin isn't connected with the feminine. The virgin isn't embodying any sort of in that.
Okay, then he's not good.
Wait, hold on one second. He's not embodying these feminine qualities. So what is the hypermasculine but the absence of feminine? So is Chad really hypermasculine? Well, no. I would say Chad is a picture of a well-adjusted man who embraces feminine archetypes as well as masculine archetypes and isn't afraid of femininity or masculinity or androgyny, versus the virgin in the meme who is, head down, very, very masculine. You can't mistake that. There's nothing feminine about in that meme. The greasy coat. Who knows? The idea is there's a frustration. He's walking down. He's just sort of angry, right? So what is hypermasculine but the absence of the feminine, right?
Well, no, because masculinity is marked by strength, and the strength to accept the feminine. Like that's sort of the most childish modern way of masculinity is like, haha, no girls allowed. But like in the old days, if you said that, like, oh, the pure man is somebody who doesn't need women, like what the fuck are you talking about? The true man was somebody who could master both man and woman. It could master both sides. Like, in fact, Jung talks about it. He talks about how to master the shadow is the apprentice work, but to master the anima is the master work. So if Chad is like this super well-adjusted guy so well adjusted that he can understand all of his projections and
You
the
see
pure
what
phallus. He is the pure
the
phallus.
well, look at the ace. So there's the King of Swords, then there's the Queen of Swords, but then there's the Ace of Swords. So what is above man and woman but, like your favorite topic, androgyny? There's an embracing of the masculine and the feminine that is I'm just checking if this works, is ultimately more powerful than either of them. In the Chad, rather than the Prince of Swords, is the Chad, not the Ace of Swords.
Very
right?
true. He is the.
And I think a feminine can also be, a woman can also be the Ace of Swords. I think that's the difference, is the woman can be the Ace of Swords.
Here's the
man can
problem:
be
is
the
that
Ace of Swords.
women are usually viewed as women, unless they are androgynous. But a man is not always viewed as a man. But I think a woman is almost always viewed as a woman. Because a man can be seen as like, oh, a nobody. But usually women are, women and children first, blah, blah, blah. Women are...
I think the view might be distorted a bit, because being male, I would argue that to men as a straight male, maybe, or whatever, I don't know. I don't know anyone's sexual orientation here, but as a male who's attracted to women, there's an otherness to them, versus a woman, there's an otherness to men. So I think that there can be a sort of, I don't know, I think a woman can embrace the masculine, and I think, and in that way they rise above the feminine at times. And I think while both can rise above in a way by embracing...
embraces the feminine, does he rise above the masculine?
I would say he does in a way, but I would say the difference is the man can at times channel the man, and the woman can channel the woman, right? So even if they are androgynous, the woman can revert back to the queen, below the ace, the queen, and the man can revert to the king. But they can't really, unless, if you identify as a man, that's a stable gender identity, and you're identifying sort of that. So I think you can embrace both to androgyny, and I think you can embrace masculinity and femininity. But then there's the dynamic. The unconscious is dynamic, and our interactions with the world force us into different places, because we aren't an island. Even if even as an egoist, even the egoist isn't an island. Interacting with other people will force us into the archetypes, and as mirrors for the other, because they don't know us and of ourselves, we get put into the archetype of, depending on what it is, we get masculinity can be transferred onto us. People have bad relationships with men. We are men. That gets transferred onto us. If we have bad relationships with women, that gets transferred onto women, right?
It's a great point about the Ace of Swords. You really did you struck it right on the head. But also the reality is that the Chad does not exist. The Ace of Swords immediately degrades into the Two of Swords. Like, there is always and that's funny, because usually you'd think like, oh, one would become, one would advance into two, but it's not so in tarot. In tarot, it just gets worse and worse. And I'll take my, I'll use Rider.
We have another guy. I just want to check in with him really quickly. Hello, Pedro.
Hey,
Welcome.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Vaguely. It's a little muted.
I don't know. I never use this microphone.
That's all right. Wait, know what I can do is I can actually juice you. Now try it again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I turned it up a bit.
My accent's pretty bad. I never speak English.
Well, welcome. I can understand you. Very understandable.
Thanks.
Speaking clearly,
Thanks. I hear what Chris was saying, and it made me think about something which I was thinking the other day. That it seems that androgyny, when it comes from a man transitioning to a woman, or not, I don't know if the word is transitioning, but presenting himself as feminine, it seems is deemed more offensive by the conservative man than a woman being presenting herself as masculine. And maybe that says something about how in our society masculinity is seen as something to be achieved rather than something that's just taken for granted. Masculinity is valid and therefore it's something you have to earn and maintain.
I think that's an important point.
Mm.
Yeah, I think I see myself, I see myself doing that sometimes. Sometimes, a more, I think men, I see it a lot when more androgynous or even more male presenting females come into groups of men. I think they're more easily embraced than a more feminine woman is. I think there's something that there's a pause with femininity versus a woman who's maybe doesn't embrace the archetypes of traditional femininity. I think more easily moves through male environments.
Yeah, I don't know how it is with women if the women discriminate against another woman who is androgynous, but as a man, and maybe this is a societal thing because I live in Brazil, but here, if you're growing up, if your friend was effeminate, he was he was ostracized. He was seen as almost a threat. He was seen as something to be ashamed of.
Well, well, if we're talking about like presenting as the other gender, like there are TERFs, there are trans exclusionary radical feminists. So to say if it's like if we view it as like the ultimate invasion of the feminist space by trans women, which could just as like it's in a way it's sort of the opposite of the man being like, come on in, masculine woman, doesn't matter, but a feminine man coming into a woman's space is like, no, leave, you're not a part of us.
When I say presenting themselves as masculine or presenting themselves as feminine, I don't necessarily mean being completely transgender, but just subtle ways in which a person is slightly more feminine or slightly more masculine. Because certainly against full-on transition, there is a lot more prejudices on both sides. But I feel that for a woman to express herself as masculine and not transition, but just have masculine features, that is not seen as offensive. Maybe because the masculine itself is not offensive.
But I think masculine men usually despise masculine women, whereas the more effeminate men, I don't know how often I hear like the more soft guys say like, oh, a dyke, whereas like a more harsh guy is gonna be like, look at this dyke, because they value women only for sexual attractiveness, whereas the more socialized
So you
guy,
think there's an aggression against?
yeah.
I don't think men. I really think that is dying off quite a bit in terms of. I mean, there's still men who are obviously homophobic and are against lesbians.
Yeah,
I've heard story from friends that are lesbians who have to deal with harassment, but there's like you said, the feminine man is something very different. The man who's embraced femininity in a non-traditionally masculine Chad way, right?
Yeah.
So
for me, my perspective is a little funny because I live in a very small, almost rural town in Brazil, but I go to college in university in a philosophy school, which is completely very far to the left and very progressive, and I have a lot of classmates who are androgynous and so on, but where I live, it's a completely different reality, and it seems two extremes.
Yeah. I think in general, the, like I said, as I said, I don't know if you were watching earlier, but I was talking about how
I just came out.
oh, gotcha. I was saying cognitively we can make changes during the day. When we sleep and the unconscious content comes during at night. I think in university in the same way. We try to improve, and we cognitively try to make improvements, much like in cognitive therapies, we cognitively try to make improvements, and then it sort of gets brought down, and the society, the non-university society, is sort of like the ambassadors of the historical unconscious, because they're sort of that acts through them. The traditionalists, even people who went to college, it's just sort of the traditionalist stuff becomes the part that breaks down all the improvements, like like you're talking about. We were talking about the clean your room, and is that the chicken before the egg with Peterson? Cleaning your room will help. Of course, the behaviorists will go, of course, behaviors equals emotions equals action. And, to some degree it's true, but I don't think, but the underlying stuff is still there, and will still sort of break it down a little bit. You'll sort of get, all the progress that's cognitively based, that isn't emotional. And that's why I believe in psychoanalysis and psychodynamic stuff so much more, because I really believe there is objective reality. That reality is not a purely subjective idea. And I think psychoanalysis and the unconscious is a really interesting manifestation of it, because the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in in our feelings, in the weight of the world and how it affects us, right? So we can talk a big game, and I could hypothetically try to blend in with whatever environment I'm in, but there's something empty about it, and there's always inconvenient historical content. And that's sort of part of why I wanted to do this. The masculinity isn't going away. You can't.
Nathan made it a very interesting.
Even if it's very inconvenient at times, because a lot of times, like you were talking about earlier, it can be intrinsically oppressive, intrinsically involve that traditionalist destruction. I think that's an aspect of masculinity.
Nathan made a very interesting point that men are escaping their intrinsic destruction quicker than women are escaping their intrinsic creation. Like he said, that we are deindustrialized, emasculation, or I may be misunderstanding you, but essentially that machines allow men to be less masculine. There's less like hard work, less war, etc. But women. I want to
read this exact statement he made. Deindustrializing emasculation has accelerated faster than the development of techno-wombs to defeminize the woman. Just because it's very Landian, and I like it.
But men have made machines to let themselves not be men.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting too. The man, it's easier for him. I've always thought it's easier for I've always said that symbolic order, and someone comes into therapy and they're lost in the imaginary, and they're lost in the imaginary versus they're lost in the symbolic. I've always had such a much easier time somebody who's like very repressed. You just chip away versus sort of like putting stuff together. I always find psyches intrinsically, they're so much easier to pull apart in a way that isn't helpful than it is to actually help people, right? Because if you think about what it means to destroy, you don't have to destroy in any particular manner. You just pow, and it's gone. Versus you build something, you have to build. You can't just build anything, right? It has to build.
Destruction doesn't have to be organized or follow systematic rules or some kind.
Sorry, say that one more time.
That destruction doesn't have to be organized in any way. It's much more simpler to destruct.
I think
you also
of destruction. I think that's a very, very religious view of like, oh, destruction is sort of this vague thing, whereas creation is very well put together. I think
No, but
Creation
very-
has a structure, though.
it's very
but
like
another thing he said was that that you didn't repeat in the second time was that there's no system of rules for destruction necessarily. There doesn't have to be, and I think that's important because then that gets, you know, when you're constructing something, you need rules of construction, and maybe you need a whole system, and then who decides that system? And you know, it's much more controversial than like we just need to get rid of these projects or this stuff. Like we just need to, you know, you don't. I think there's, you know, you can look at it on any level. You can look at the person who's in charge of destroying a building, and the person who's in charge of that has much less prestige than the person who's in charge of building and or designing it, or you know, it's like it's not.
But that's a religious thing. That's an archetypal.
It's not religious. That's just reality. That's actuality. There's
Exactly. We
mean,
believe it
put a
is, but that's
religious-
an archetypal way of looking at things. The devil is this destructive force, while all holy and all intelligent God creates. But the truth is that the devil is just as smart, the devil is just as skilled, and just as systematic in his destruction, whereas God is just as systematic in his creation. We can never, ever, act as though destruction is easy, destruction is simple. Destruction is extremely important, and creation is extremely important. They're intrinsic.
But there's no. That's a false dichotomy, because just because something's simple doesn't mean it's not important. That's not follow at all.
But that's what you were saying. Like you said that because destruction doesn't have rules, that the destroyer is not held in the same prestige as the creator.
I would say
the
that's
system.
true.
There's less. I mean, there are.
Yeah, I would say the destroyer isn't held in the same prestige. There's this old Jewish story. I forget. I want to say it's called Shlomiel and Shlomazel, but both of those are insults. So I forget.
Yeah.
But the idea is, you know, Shlomiel goes, I'm gonna make this guy a great person. I'm gonna make this guy great again. Just kidding. But he's like, this is a pauper, and then he builds up, and then the Shlomazel goes, I'm gonna destroy him with one word. Blah blah blah.
That sounds like Job.
A little bit, yeah. It is a little like Job. But the idea is that it's to look at the cracks in a building and then put your sort of chisel there and pop it, and so it falls down, I think it's can be a much more jouissance producing experience, especially if you need that building. I think it can be tempting because you're so excited. Oh, I see a crack in the structure. Or if you're a child, I see a crack in mommy and daddy's authority, right? And adults are stupid because they're inconsistent. Adults are stupid because they're sort of hypocritical. Well,
So is Socrates held in low prestige because he is the destroyer of the old thought?
he's the creator of a lot.
But he initially
Yeah,
was the
he
destroyer.
was held in. He was.
And because now that we've changed his view, we see him as the creator of philosophy. In reality, he is the destroyer of the old way. In reality, he was the destroyer. We have made him into the creator. We have
That's true.
chosen to view him in a higher prestige. We've made him a god when in fact he was the devil.
Well, that's,
Yeah, I see Chris's point. I understand.
yeah. That reminds me of every time. Sometimes I hear.
If we go with Apollonian Dionysian, the Dionysian will always win. Which is what I'm saying. The destructive force is just as important, if not more important, than the creative Apollonian Socratic. And of course, Socrates is self-destroying. Socrates is immolating humanity. He is mutilating structures that are required. The Dionysian destroys everything equally. He does not see a flaw. He creates the flaw, and he's like the ocean that makes rocks into sand, whereas the Socratic takes the sand, blows it into glass, and then breaks it and says, "Ha! Look what I did." We will always have more powerful Dionysians. There will always be more destruction. And that doesn't mean that destruction is weak. It doesn't mean destruction is more pointless. or less important simply because it is more powerful, and we're afraid. We love to belittle the destroyer. We love to hate the devil.
But what you were just saying is,
I never said it was less
right? The
important.
destroyer, like you
Yeah.
have, like I think that was a great point. You know, the destroyer is the creator. These are both, you know, like the masculine, the male is the masculine and the feminine working through, and a person is just a person, and sometimes they can be viewed through the destroyer, and sometimes they can be viewed through the creator. And you know, somebody who orders the destruction of a building to create another building, to that person who relied on the original building is going to be like, this guy's a destroyer, versus the guys who are using the second building, this guy is a creator, right? So there's always the lines of flight, or the right.
So time is what defines creation or destruction. It is time and belief systems. It's time, creation of
Right?
What I tried to say when I said that creation is systematic, or more, I think I said complex than destruction, and that destruction is, I don't think I would use the right word. I think I meant more to say it's more, well, destruction is going to happen, regardless of intervention and conscious intervention. And creation is a more deliberate process, which in a way requires to create a way of going about it.
That is a very good point. It's the masculine creator. Like Dionysians are in fact feminine, because all of his followers, Dionysus.
And in Greece, Dionysus was the god that women worshipped because they weren't allowed to worship.
So that goes along with women as sort of maintaining reality as destruction, whereas the masculine creator, who will eventually be the devil because he destroyed something else, like Socrates, he is a destroyer, but we view him as a creator because he destroyed to give us a place for what we are now. But so if is Chad so accelerated that he skips the creation and takes on the pure destructive form? He is so masculine. He's Socrates, but he doesn't create philosophy. He just destroys.
I think I'm gonna have to wrap it up soon.
All right.
On that note, like you're saying, the original topic, the Chad psychoanalysis. Well, isn't Chad just a multiplicity? He can be the destroyer. He can be the feminine. He can be the hypermasculine. And there's a funniness to the, but he's sort of the masculine projection, and we're just whatever at the moment. He can sort of embody Chad Pence Peterson 2020.
I always felt that
Nathan types again, right?
I always felt that when observing this relationship of Chad and Beta and Alpha, that what was Alpha, what was Chad, was a freedom to truly. It's this libertation from the anxieties and the insecurities that lead people to be taken into someone else's wing, and not be able to be out on the rain on their own.
Chad very much is God. He very much is free from all anxiety and all worry. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is.
Oh, jeez.
He can be all of it, and he is all of it. Chad is God. The virgin sinner.
The virgin sinner. I think.
What up?
I think this is okay. Do you have any last things to say? What were you saying?
Final of the chat, or the virgin death versus the Chad ascension. And so bringing it back to the everything. So you have the virgin death phone, but he's old. The night.
Oh, you're cutting out again. Your internet connection suddenly got bad.
No.
The chat-
What about now?
Oh yeah, it's a little better. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Nah.
bed sheets.
Oh yeah.
What about bed sheets? Just said
They're not very.
bed sheets.
The virgin is
They're not very aesthetic.
Oh, you're cutting out. I can't understand you. Can't understand you, man. Why does it stop working? I'm sorry.
How about we end? I have a tarot card.
The best. we don't have contact. Oh, the Chad, and then the Chad is dead. But the Chad is the virgin death versus the Chad ascension.
This is a Chad ascension.
I have a tarot card, but I don't know what it is.
Oh yeah, that is how we've been ending. Chris picks a random tarot card. What's your tarot card for the day?
Let's see. The nature of our chat and the nature of our discovery of Chad. I knew it would be this card. It was the Ace of Swords because that was how you described Chad, and I could feel that that would be the one. I could.
There goes.
Look, because I had the cards facing. I had the back facing, but I knew it would be this card.
No
and
way.
so the act of Chad
You
is one that is formless. It is pure energy. There is no form of Chad. Chad is only an energy.
The Ace of Swords, the masculine, the feminine, the androgyny, the reverting to the king, the reverting to the queen. You have no choice but to revert to negative masculine traits. But there is the positive masculine. There is the creating through delineation, which can be empty, which can be destructive. But how do we get by it? Well, you have to figure it out.
Chad is Oregon.
Chad is Oregon.
True.
Oregon.
Very
Chad,
true.
Oregon.
Thus, Reich is the ultimate.
Physically.
The Chad psychoanalysis is Reichian psychoanalysis.
Oh
End
my
it.
God.
End it. Call it.
All right. I'll fair enough. The Ace of Swords. I'll do it the way Lacanians do it. The Ace of Swords, the masculine, the feminine. Chad is not a singular masculine archetype, but Chad is
Chad is it.
the it. All right, guys. Thank you for talking. It's been fun. Thank you for coming on, Pedro and Nathan. Good to see you.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah.
New faces. Sorry that your mics.
In video form versus in profile picture. Just you see that, because I know Pedro from this. It's the face, just a still. So it's good to see everyone animated and alive.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
All
I hope I can participate more in these hangouts in the future.
Absolutely. I hope to see you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good. It's good talking with you. It's always good to talk. Talking is so much. It's such a different Gnostic emanation, as Chris put it, than typing.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Nathan, fix your internet. That's what I put on games when people lag.
We need a Patreon. We need a Patreon so that everybody gets higher. Everybody gets better internet, better webcams, better mic.
Oh, there you go.
Patreon.
All right, I'm gonna call it, guys.
Right.
So long.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night. Good night and good luck.